Let's hope and pray that it continues here in the good old USA. The only good Muslim is a devil.
First, my empathy.
But listen to the way the money is spent.
Those agents in the field that work domestic terrorism, about 20%, and we have about 80% working international terrorism.
That's right. 4 times as many agents on international terror, even though last year just 1 person died from an Islamic terror attack in America. 49 people were killed in domestic extremist attacks. Administration officials tell CNN that the White House has refused to beef up the fight despite pleas from the Department of Homeland Security.
There is a mindset that has to be dealt with.
And this is not just an American story. There is now a worldwide movement of white supremacists sharing their twisted ideas on the internet. In March, a gunman massacred 51 people at prayer in New Zealand. In his 87-page manifesto, the terrorist cited his inspiration: white supremacists in America, Britain, Sweden, Norway. Then, in a vicious circle of racial hate, the El Paso shooter cited New Zealand as an inspiration. All of these people believe they are being replaced and must fight to resist it. And much of this discourse on white supremacy is centered in the United States of America. How did this happen? Where did it come from? After slavery, the Holocaust, the Civil Rights Movement. The truth is, race has been the central conflict in American life from the day the Republic was born. We've witnessed extreme racism before, in periods of upheaval and rapid social change. And now, once again, we are living in such a time.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
We need to make America great again.
Trump definitely energized the alt-right. Because we have this connection with them, we can inflect his policies.
We are determined to take our country back. We're going to fulfill the promises of Donald Trump.
Many people say Donald Trump is himself a white supremacist. Whether he is or is not, there is no doubt he is a hero to many in the white supremacy movement. The current upsurge might have been triggered, however, because of another president.
Thank you.
Barack Obama's election was a moment of joy and unity for millions of Americans.
God bless the United States of America.
But some, perhaps many, were shocked by it.
Clearly, the presence of a black family in the White House deranged many millions of Americans.
Once Obama was in the White House, the backlash grew and grew.
You remember some of the racist caricatures of Obama as a monkey, as a gorilla.
Overt and ugly displays of racism became common.
Afro-Leninism coming to you on a silver platter. Barack Hussein Obama.
Why doesn't he give his birth certificate?
The incendiary charge that Obama was not born in this country.
No other American president was badgered to prove he was an American.
The idea of whether he was born in the United States, I think that's a metaphor. Is he one of us? Answer, no.
Obama combined the two fires that feed white supremacy: attitudes towards blacks and fears about immigration.
Whether our forebears were strangers who crossed the Atlantic, or the Pacific, or the Rio Grande, we are here only because this country welcomed them in.
Throughout the history of this country, immigration has reinvigorated the United States. But it has also awakened the darkest American impulses. one little remembered chapter holds a frightening reminder of where those impulses can lead. Ellis Island, 100 years ago. Immigrants were pouring into the country, at times 100,000 a month, packed body to body on rickety boats, penniless, hungry, desperate to become Americans.
These newcomers were considered just inferior. Polish people or Jewish people or Southern Italians.
At the time, many European immigrants were considered to be entirely different races.
People referred to people from Ireland as a race, people from Hungary as a race, the Jews as a race.
With new enemies to hate, membership in the Klan soared. Some of America's most prominent men were under those hoods.
Hugo Black was a member of the Ku Klux Klan.
Until 1925. He went on to serve as a Supreme Court justice until 1971. Back then, white supremacy was an elite movement, led by some of America's richest and most powerful. They came up with a solution. A pseudoscience called eugenics, based on the belief that many Americans were mentally defective, among them immigrants.
America is degenerating.
Eugenicists believe so-called defectives should not be allowed to reproduce.
Sterilized women who were thought not capable of having the right kind of children.
Thousands of women were sterilized as the fake science became a national craze. The eugenics movement decided it was time to bring its so-called research to Capitol Hill.
Charts of data purporting to show that people from Italy, from Poland, from the Slavic countries were genetically inferior to the Northern European, to the Nordic, the Aryan, the Anglo-Saxon.
After months of debate, a new immigration law was passed in 1924 with draconian cuts and quotas for supposed undesirables.
They shut the door and reduced immigration to the United States by 97%.
Meanwhile, something even more disturbing was happening in Europe. An ambitious young German leader was watching America closely.
Adolf Hitler had some real praise for the United States.
Hitler was even meeting with the leaders of the eugenics movement.
Adolf Hitler said the United States is really on the money. We can learn from them.
As Hitler's power grew and his ambitions became clear, Americans saw the terrifying consequences of white supremacy. Most pulled back from the edge. Eugenics died out in America. Of course, Hitler's plans did not.
That idea of improving the human race, which is what eugenics is all about, definitely had echoes in Nazi policy of the 1930s, and the Holocaust is one horrific consequence of that.
The white supremacy of today has not reached the level it did a century ago. But some of its deeply troubling ideas are returning.
You don't think all races are equal?
No, I do not. And I don't see why anyone would.
The white nationalist Jared Taylor is a learned man, a graduate of Yale like myself. But we don't see eye to eye, to say the least.
I want the people of Africa to make Africa the best possible continent they can for Africans. And Africans, I believe, will be happiest not living in society like ours.
I think that you place so much weight on the fact that a certain group of people's ancestors spent a lot more time in the sun than other groups, and so their skin is darker.
Do you really think that blacks and whites are basically identical twins separated at birth? That they are really indistinguishable and replaceable? In other words,
Taylor believes that non-whites have made America worse.
Why are Hispanics not okay? They are Europeans.
Spaniards are Europeans, but the people who qualify as Hispanic, they can come from Honduras or Guatemala or Mexico. They're genetically and visually and physically different from Europeans.
So In the 19th century, people thought of Jews as a separate race. Are Jews the same race?
Jews are a subrace of whites, as far as I can tell. Eastern European Jews who came from the shtetl. They dressed in odd ways, they behaved in odd ways, they were clearly alien.
Apparently, Taylor says, some Jews are white.
There are many Ashkenazi Jews that do not look Jewish at all. And Ashkenazi Jews have lived among Europeans and interbred with them for a long time.
Racism can become confusing.
I want to know who's we and who's they.
Mr. Zarkani, almost never is there any confusion as to what race someone is. Almost never.
Well, let's try one case. Mine.
I think scholars would agree I have as good a claim on being Caucasian as you do. Caucasian meant people who come out of Central Asia, out of the Caucasus. In fact, the term Aryan, which is another one that is often used, comes specifically out of India, which is where I grew up. So why am I not a Caucasian? If you are advocating policies based on racial categories, I just want to understand where I fit in.
I think most people would not consider you white.
It's not a popularity contest. Either this is a scientific fact or it isn't.
Most of the time, it's not all that difficult to tell, even just from visual inspection.
You look at people and try to figure out how white they were, even though you don't quite know what white means.
Oh, I know very well what white means. You don't, but I do.
Later in this hour, a deep dive. How is race determined?
What is it like to be a startup in Dubai?
It's rewarding, but it's worth it. Starting a business is really tough. Oh God, I feel like I could write a book about this.
This month, CNN shines a light on the startup scene in this thriving gateway between East and West.
This is the place where you have an idea, you connect to the right people, you can create that and actualize it.
Delve into the world of Dubai's entrepreneurs, their highs and lows, as they look to make it big. Follow that startup. Saturday on CNN. Next week, Amanpour is live with a newsmaker lineup. Former US Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, Brazilian Foreign Minister Ernesto Araújo, and Democratic 2020 candidates Beto O'Rourke and Cory Booker. Amanpour next week on CNN.
Oklahoma City, 1995. A truck bomb rips through a federal building.
There was a boom and there was nothing left. Seemed like the whole world ended.
168 are dead, including 19 children.
You were not watching some scene of international catastrophe. You were looking at your own backyard.
At the time, it was the deadliest attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. The terrorist, a young man named Timothy McVeigh. He has been thought of as a lone wolf, but in reality, he was part of a movement. He had been a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He had contacts with other white supremacists across the country. And the inspiration for his attack was a book that's been called the Bible of American white supremacists. It gave birth to a little-known armed white rebellion that continues to this day.
Just cold-blooded murder, way you put it.
To understand Oklahoma City and today's violence in El Paso and all of the bloodshed that came before it, we need to understand Timothy McVeigh's favorite book. It's called The Turner Diaries.
Nationalism really is the wave of the future.
It was written in the 1970s by William Pierce.
I did admire many things that Hitler wrote.
He was a one-time physics professor who became a leading figure in the white supremacist movement. In the 1960s, Pierce saw his cause in disarray.
what? God will die before I even want it.
For years, the all-powerful Ku Klux Klan had led the charge.
Threats, beatings, rapings, and of course, murder.
Then came the Civil Rights Movement, a crushing blow to the Klan.
Free at last! Free at last! Make Mongolia! We are free at last!
In its wake, Klan membership declined, and white supremacists were divided among competing ideologies. Pierce wrote the Turner Diaries, hoping to unite the movement behind a story.
Pierce knew that fiction would be more powerful than facts.
It was the tale of Earl Turner, a soldier in a white rebellion.
We are in a war to the death with the Jew.
Against the evil Jewish-controlled American government. Turner bombs FBI headquarters and other targets, joining an elite terrorist group called the Order. The group kills millions of blacks, Jews, and their allies on the road to victory.
Spoiler alert, the book ends with Turner flying a megaton bomb into the Pentagon.
Pierce's race war fantasy struck a chord.
They got so many requests for the self-published paperback, they started to stock it.
Selling 500,000 copies in the years that followed.
Is, to this point, the most influential piece of white supremacist writing that exists.
And what began as fiction became a real-life rebellion. Powerful new white supremacist armies sprung up in the 1980s, boasting tens of thousands of hardcore members.
You can say we're the frontline soldiers for the movement.
One group actually took its name from the book. The Order.
There was a sea change in the kind of activity carried out by the White Power movement.
The groups adopted the book's terrorist tactics.
They stole $4 million in armed
including armed robberies to get funding.
Alan Berg was murdered after
and assassinations.
10 defendants were charged with conspiracy to overthrow the U.S. government.
The federal government tried to bring the movement down, indicting several of its ringleaders on seditious conspiracy and other charges. But they were all acquitted by an all-white jury.
The trial is really important because when it collapsed, the government got paranoid and really backed away from treating white supremacy as a coherent movement.
It is our young people who are going to reclaim America!
Emboldened, these white power groups gained even more momentum in the 1990s, collaborating with other anti-government militias.
The White Power movement grows into the militia movement.
Then, a bloody standoff.
Weber's son, his wife, and a United States Marshal were killed
between white separatists and federal agents in Ruby Ridge, Idaho. And the demise of the Branch Davidian cult, battling the feds near Waco, Texas.
You're a disgrace to the white race!
Brought the movement to a fever pitch.
While these incidents are happening, the number of militia groups in the United States is skyrocketing. The number of white supremacist groups is leaping in tandem with that.
Among those angry young men was a Gulf War veteran named Timothy McVeigh. He had been very interested in the Turner Diaries while he was in the Army.
When he first got it, he read it, constantly for 3 or 4 weeks. And they kept wanting me to read it. You gotta read this book. You gotta read this book.
After McVeigh left the military, he radicalized even more, getting involved with a militia in Michigan. He met with white supremacists across the nation while on the gun show circuit, where he also sold his favorite book.
I just arrived today.
He was outraged by Waco,
Somebody told me a lot of people would be scared.
which he visited in person during the standoff. The fiery inferno there drove him to action.
He finally decides that this government is so dangerous to its own citizens that it needs to be destroyed.
Holy cow. On April 19th, 1995, the 2-year anniversary of Waco, McVeigh carried out what he considered to be his masterpiece. The attack was eerily similar to Earl Turner's attack on the FBI in the Turner Diaries. It was the same kind of target, a federal building. A similar kind of bomb, detonated at the same time of day, just after 9 a.m. McVeigh had become Earl Turner, his white supremacist hero.
When he was arrested a few days after the bombing, he had pages of the Turner Diaries in his car, and that's how people were able to connect the dots on these things.
Today, there are tributes to McVeigh and to the Turner Diaries all over the internet. Remember Atom Waffen, the deadly group said to be planning attacks on nuclear plants? Authorities discovered that they had explosives, radioactive material, and a framed photograph of Timothy McVeigh, along with a copy of the Turner Diaries.